and good evening to all. Welcome to what I'm about to introduce a gentleman who doesn't believe in predictions, but I can predict with certainty that you're going to enjoy the next hour or so. I know this not only from my own experiences of having talked with this gentleman many times, but also from the fact that just over a year ago, I had the great pleasure of interviewing him right here in this room, and I see many faces of people who were here back then, and it was so much fun, and there were so many stories and ideas left untold that right there we agreed that we would do this again. So this is actually part 2. I should also mention that this evening is being done in conjunction with JREF, the James Randi Educational Foundation, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that is. But I will also tell you that through the hard work of John Armstrong and DJ Grothy. DJ is the president of JREF, and John, of course, is on the board of trustees and runs a lot of stuff. And between the two of them, it is being worked on that this will be a series, and that we will have more of these long-term interviews, long-form interviews, involving people who intersect these two related worlds of the skeptical world, the paranormal world, the magician's world, and sort of everything in between. So no better way to get that started than for me to reintroduce, for part 2 of our conversation, the gentleman of the evening. Please welcome the amazing James Randi.
Well, thank you, Max. Thank you so much. Oh.
I think they like you.
Well, no, they just applaud, you see. They do that automatic. It's a reaction. It's built into the DNA. It's a long story. I don't want to get into it.
All right. Let's move from that long story to a short story, because I have been informed that you have a topical tale you'd like to tell.
Yes, I'm sure. First of all, I've got to say that I am very honored to have been asked back here. The first one was pretty good. I don't know what I'm going to say this time, but I hope it's just as good. Or I welcome you folks back to the castle again. Many of you have probably not been here since the fire. And I'm amazed at the improvement of the close-up room, for one thing. Have you seen that? And in the dining room. I really like the changes that are made in the dining room. I'm so happy to be here at the castle, which is still with us, ladies and gentlemen, as I am. So there. But I am reminded, I'm reminded of the story of the two gentlemen at Miami Beach who are in adjacent deck chairs. Now, you see, I saw the improvements, the beautiful rug upstairs and stuff like that. It turns out that the castle, luckily, was heavily covered in insurance, and that did the job. And I'm very happy to assure you that if you should light another fire, it'll be taken care of, just in case. But the two gentlemen at the beach in Miami, side by side in deck chairs, one looks over and to the other, and he says, "How do you do, sir? My name is Feynman. I came here under strange circumstances." The other fellow says, "What circumstances?" He says, "Well," he said, "you know, I was in the textile business, and we had a fire. It was a terrible fire. And then when the insurance agent came to me, I realized I was really well covered in insurance. I made so much that at this early age, I've retired. And that's what brings me to Miami Beach. How come you're here?" He says, "Well, that's a very similar story. Very similar story. I was in the hardware business, and we had a flood, a terrible flood. Oh, you have no idea. It was just, and that brought me here." The other fellow looks at him puzzled. He said, "A flood?" He says, "Yeah, a flood. How do you set a flood?" Think about it. Think about it. No, I'm very, very happy to announce to you that the castle has recovered beautifully, as you can see, and the shows are back in full swing. There's still a few adjustments and things to be done, but they're being done, and our castle is back in business. Yay! You bet.
Stay out here with us.
I'll try. I'm leaving tomorrow morning, but I'll be here for.
So have you seen any good magic here?
Have I seen any good magic here? Such a question. I tell you, the other night, well, I've been here 3 or 4 nights now in a row, and I must say that the show I saw a couple of nights ago, I went around, I took in every possible show, one after the other, bang, 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 like that. And that was simply the best night I had ever spent at the Magic Castle. And I've spent a lot of nights here, full evenings, and that one was, that all of the shows were simply superb. I was stunned by it. And if you haven't seen the shows yet, folks, you've got a great treat ahead of you.
Well, the last time we spoke at one of these, we talked a bit about some of the magicians you admired in your youth. And that would include Harry Blackstone Sr. was one of the people we talked about, and several others. Do you feel that there is a significant difference between the magic that was going on when you were coming up as a teenager and what's going on in magic now? And I'll ask you this both plus and minus.
Well, I must say that the one thing I've observed in my long career in magic is the rise of the Asian element. I went, right after the war, I went over to Japan. I was actually entertaining troops there, Canadian and American troops, as a nightclub act sort of thing. And I got to see Japan right after the war. I was approached by so many young folks backstage who wanted to get into magic. And they had all seen Channing Pollock. This is an interesting angle. They had seen Channing Pollock, and had one gentleman, a very serious young man, who approached me with his manager, and the manager spoke English very well, thank goodness. And he explained to me that this young man wanted to go to New York and wanted to get on the Sullivan Show. That was the big thing in those days, of course. And they wanted my advice on how to go about this. And deep from within my wise brain, I said, yes, I suggest that you'd want to go over there and announce your arrival in great style with a press agent and everything, hire a press agent, and dress in Japanese costume. Because America is very curious about Asian folks, and particularly the Japanese. They want to get to know them. And I think that would be a great success. And he translated to the artist, who then, Subarashi desu ne. This gentleman speaks Japanese, so we can have little chats on the side. You see. Yeah, right. Baranoki o mite kudasai. No, I'll tell you what that later. Yes. Watch your language. Japanese, what's yours? He was horrified that he should wear Japanese costume. And I was informed that he wanted to look like Channing Pollock because they had seen the movie, the famous movie, the nightclub movie with Channing Pollock.
European Nights was the
yes,
name of the
indeed.
movie.
Thank you very much. My dad takes care of me with things like that. And yes, and they wanted to do dove magic. And I said, no, you'll never. There are hundreds of kids all over the place, and adults, of course, doing dove magic acts. And they don't want that. They would like something flavored Asian. And, oh, no, we can't do that. He came over with his agent, without the press agent stuff in advance and such, and he sort of vanished and went back to Japan. And I'm sure that they thought to themselves, I wish we'd listened to the old duck there with the beard, because that could have been a sensation. That would have been wonderful. Because I had a connection with the Sullivan Show, even though I never played the show. But I had Mark Letty, the agent in New York,
Who booked all the Sullivan shows.
Yeah. And it was a great gig for him, wasn't it? Oh, yes. Every act that went on the Sullivan Show went through Mark Letty. And I could have talked to Mark, and I could have gotten him on the show in Japanese costume, but he wouldn't have any part of it. They all wanted to be Channing Pollock.
And since Mark Letty was managing Channing Pollock, I would say the odds of getting a dove act on the Sullivan Show were particularly low.
Yes, but very, very low, yes.
So that was an interesting route, but we never got to the answer to my question.
What was the question?
The question was, do you feel there's a difference between the magicians who were prominent when you were coming up as a teenager and the magicians who are prominent now?
Well, of course, the advent of television made a great deal of difference, and a great deal of difference, a phenomenal difference. I know I remember an episode with Harry Blackstone, Sr. Harry Blackstone Sr. I saw this in Canada. Oh, it's going to be a nice day after all. I saw a disaster with poor Harry. He was doing his business where he had the, I'm talking about Senior now, up in Canada on a CBC show there, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And he did a business where he wasn't aware of the fact that he was mic'd. He was used to bellowing out at the audience like this. He never used a microphone on stage. And he had a great voice that carried to the far ends of the theater, I assure you. And he got the fellow up on stage. It was an audience participation thing where he had to cue the guy. And all of the cues came through very clearly. When I turn around, give me a push in the back. Yeah. And the guy said, yeah, of course. And well, we heard every cue, and I sat there at home watching this in black and white TV, saying, "Oh no, it can't happen that way." Harry got over it, okay, but he wasn't aware of the fact that that wasn't his métier.
Right, and this is why Harry Jr.
Yes.
wore what's called a belly switch, so that even when his hands were occupied, he could, by pushing out with his stomach, he could turn his microphone on and off for such cueing, and he would do it. He did it with such precision that you would never catch it. I mean, it would take you many
and later in
hours
his
of
life,
studying to see it to catch
as his
it.
belly developed, he would shut himself off inadvertently. Oh, boo, hiss.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up, we do want to talk a bit about JREF, which is you've been involved in various organizations in the skeptical field, but this one is the one that is ongoing and flourishing. One of the things that has been happening with JREF is the Amazing Meeting,
Yes.
which is a convention in Las Vegas every summer. And you just had the 9th of the
That's right.
TAMs to
Right.
the Amazing Meeting.
TAM for the Amazing Meeting.
Exactly. And how many people approximately were at the first one?
There were 22 at the first one.
Okay,
That
that's
was
not even
done
approximate, that's precise.
Yeah, that was not done in Vegas. That was done in Fort Lauderdale. It was
Okay.
just a little try, and we had
Right.
22 people.
And how many were at the one this past July?
As 1,672. That's a crowd.
And I was there. It was a terrific time, and there, as with previous years, there was some overlap with Magic. Jamie Ian Swiss has been involved, I think, every year on this.
Oh, yes.
But also Penn and Teller, and there are others who've come in as guests. Michael Weber has performed, Banachek, and a whole slew of magicians, people that the folks here would recognize. I was there this year. I had a great time, but one of the things that I found very interesting was the amount of diversity in the people there.
Yes. Now, we're very proud of that, too.
And as well you should be. The reason I brought this up, I was thinking about it because today is Martin Luther King Day.
Yes.
And so as I was listening to a news thing about that fact, it reminded me that at the Amazing Meeting, there was a very significant diversity, both ethnically, but also as far as gender. There was almost an equal number of women actively involved there as men. And actually, in terms of the speakers, I think it was almost exactly 50-50. Now, you've never seen a Magic convention where the ratios are like that.
That's true.
The age spectrum
The age
was
spectrum,
very
too.
wide.
That's very important.
So far as I could tell, the economic and cultural
Yes.
spectrum.
Highly varied.
It's a wonderful fact. My question is, how much of this is something that has deliberately happened through outreach or something, and how much of it is just kind of a natural, organic growth?
Well, for one thing, we've encouraged female speakers. No problem with that. There are some very competent. Harriet Hall, for example, and Dr. Harriet Hall. She is a wonderful speaker, and she does it regularly for us. We have attracted this ethnic diversity, as I said, as you said, pardon me, and the gender diversity as well. And we have all three genders there.
Only three.
Yeah. Only three, well, no, maybe 4 or 5, I'm not too sure. But in any case, the young folks that go in there too. Now, the women who go and the young folks who go, don't go there to play the roulette wheels.
Right.
They go there because they want to hear what we have to say. Mm-hmm. And when we have diverse groups afterwards of special meetings and such in small rooms and whatnot, they all fight for one another in order to get into these things. The diversity of the kind of people that we attract to a skeptical meeting. Most of the skeptical meetings are middle-aged and older, paunchy, white gentlemen. And we
You're
don't
talking
have
about
that.
skeptics meetings, not magic clubs.
Let me tell you the story of Jerry
The
Andrews.
truth hurts.
Jerry Andrews at the Fort Lauderdale Magic Club.
Okay.
Oh, Jerry Andrews was a dear friend of mine. Oh, how I miss this man. Those of you who knew Jerry Andrews would know that he was the most honest man in the world. He could not lie. He would have turned into a pile of dust if he had tried to lie. And he was a wonderful, very, very close friend of mine. I miss him dearly. But I celebrate the fact that he existed. I'm not mourning the fact that he's gone, but Jerry is up there or down there, I'm not sure. Somewhere. He's sort of with us all the time. As a matter of fact, at the JRF meetings, we always have a table set out for Jerry Andrews with his illusions on it and a picture of Jerry Andrews right there. And that table will always be there at every meeting from now on. So, well, the least we can do, really the least we can do. So, Jerry Andrews now, he did a, he participated with us in so many ways. He was so much a part of our activity. And when it came down to him doing special stuff for us, he would go out of his mind with it. He would try to arrange it. He would make phone calls. It's going to be a nice day, I'm sure. I said it, right? Did you pay the bill?
That may be a message from Jerry. It could
Yes,
be.
very careful. Now, the Jerry Andrews thing, he came out to my house in New Jersey because he was lecturing at magic clubs in New Jersey. And that was a wonderful experience for me. He stayed at my home. He told me endless stories, some of them true, I'm sure. And, oh yeah, he was very honest. And he went out to the Fort Lauderdale Magic Club. Now, the average age at the Fort Lauderdale Magic Club is deceased. And the manager of the club and everything, the head of the club was a much younger man. And when Jerry got out there, he sort of looked around and he saw these hoary old heads out there. That's a good expression actually. It's not a bad word. Out there, it looks like this. And he was saying to me, "Oh, I hope they understand what I'm going to say," because Jerry's stuff was on a very high level for the magicians. If you ever attended one of his lectures, very high level, and he had all of his pamphlets and books out there for sale. He gave his talk, and then he asked for questions. The first question he got was so inane that his heart sank. I could see him just sort of slump, and he answered it as best he could. The second question really set him off, and he turned to the manager and he said, I guess that's the end of the question period, because they hadn't understood a thing he told them. And they wanted to ask inane questions about thumb tips and such. So the president of the club said, "Okay, we'll now be offering for sale these books." And Jerry said, no, I'm not going to sell the books. They wouldn't understand it. Well, that's because he was such an honest man. He knew they would go on a shelf or into a cabinet someplace and never be read. The cover would never be turned back in order to see any of the effects in it, but they just collected these pamphlets from every magician that came to town. And then the manager came over to him and gave him the check, And he said, no, 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 I can't accept a check for this. Not for this show. No, they really didn't understand what I was saying. So I took the check from the manager. I said, I'll get it. And I put it in my pocket. I took it home, got his checkbook, deposit slip in there, mailed it to his address in Eugene, Oregon, and he deposited it in the bank. I mailed it directly to the bank. It was deposited in his account. He never knew that he got that check. He would have been embarrassed. But that's the kind of guy that Jerry Andrus was. And Jerry, thank you for being here.
Indeed. Many of the people here, of course, remember Jerry because he used to come and work the close-up room at least once a year. It was a guaranteed thing that he would come down and always have new things to argue about, which was one of the great things about
to argue
Jerry.
about, exactly.
Let's talk about some other people that you've known. One of the things that was interesting to me at TAM was that there were certain people who, whose names may or may not be well known to the general public, but who in the world of skepticism are rock stars.
Oh, yes.
I'll name some of the ones that people would recognize. Richard Dawkins, for example, was a huge figure at this event.
He's my god.
Yeah. And Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh, yes. What a wonderful speaker and a great character.
Yeah, terrific. Tell them the story about the shoes.
Yeah, the first TAM that Neil deGrasse Tyson did for us, I went out to the airport to meet him, and we dumped him into the car and drove him to the Monte Carlo, to the casino where we hold these things every year. And we chatted amicably, very, very reachable gentleman, and went to his room, and he started to unpack his suitcase while talking to us. He took a pair of shoes. Eat your hearts out on this. He took a pair of shoes and he just tossed them at the cupboard. They both did this kind of a thing and ended up like that in the cupboard. And he looked at it with a certain amount of satisfaction. He turned to me and said, I meant to do that. I looked at him, I said, I believe you. So I can lie too. See?
There you go.
But just a beautiful move, to boom like that, and he was a little stunned by it, I'm sure. Maybe it was the ambiance of the place, or the vibrations, I'm not sure. But
speaking of rock stars in the world of skepticism and science and the like, brings up a name who came up at dinner last night, actually, Carl Sagan.
oh, goodness.
Who
Yes.
you were quite close with, and who probably the single most famous scientist to the American public of the last several decades. Now, when Carl Sagan died a few years ago, one of the things that surfaced about him that had not been kind of well known or publicly known was that he was a pothead.
Yes.
That he smoked marijuana regularly.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not taking sides on this, but you were kind of public in being a bit shocked by this and upset by it.
No, I wasn't really upset, Max. I was surprised because it had never dawned on me. I had spent a lot of time with Carl, both at his home in, where is it, Corning, New York? Or where is it? Yes, exactly.
Oh, he was at Cornell, right?
Yes, Cornell. Sorry. And many, he'd been visiting us. He came to a lot of TAMs and such, and lectured for us and such. And I knew him well personally, him and his wife Andrew. And at that time, I knew Lynn Margulis, the former wife, as well, and his, a couple of his sons I knew. One of them very much into magic.
Dorian Sagan,
That's correct.
to
And,
whom I used to give lessons when he was about 14.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I did not know that. I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, anyway, Carl, when I found out that he was using marijuana, let's face it, we don't have to use slang terms for it, I was quite surprised. But then I thought to myself, wait a minute. He was a very intelligent gentleman. He knew what he was doing. He knew, I'm sure, what his limits were. And I don't think he would have ever overdone it to drive, for example, after getting high. But if it made any difference in his career and made him into the guy that he turned out to be, I've got to have a better understanding of it. And I've had a better understanding of it ever since. I've never involved myself in it. That's my personal choice. But no, I didn't have any trouble forgiving him for it. There's nothing to forgive, because he's a grown adult, But I must give you the event that happened. I was sitting in my office with Andrew Main at the foundation headquarters in Fort Lauderdale, and something came up. Andrew was sitting reading some mail, and on the couch in my office, and I saw something come up on my computer monitor there, and I laughed, and Andrew looked up and says, "What's so funny?" And I read him an astronomical joke off the screen. And Andrew laughed, and I reached out like this, and my hand froze, and Andrew was looking at me. He said, "What's the matter?" And I really did this. I looked at my hand as if it was a strange thing that I'd never seen before. I said, "Andrew, I was going to call Carl." Carl had been dead for years. And I was so shocked at what I was going to do. It was automatic to pick it up and go click, click, and he was number 2 on the dialer. And I knew he would answer at the other end, you see. I was going to read him the joke. I was horrified. I looked at my hand, and I immediately took him off the automatic dialer. I put Andrew in on the dialer in the same place, same number, at his home. But what a shock that you don't realize that people that were that close to you have actually gone, and you know you're not going to be able to talk to them again. A strange experience.
Not without a round table and the proper
Exactly,
candles.
yes. Oh, well, in that case, yes, of course we could, yes. Yes.
You've known, I mean, look, this comes partly with longevity. You are now 83?
83.
83.
Yep. Oh, thank you.
And,
Going on 100, I always say, because I'm very ambitious.
but, I mean, how many different places have you been in just in the past year? You've done several major tours.
All through Scandinavia, and yeah, I have been on tour. I did Canada. I did 9 cities in Canada in 9 days, starting in Vancouver and going to Halifax, and that's the whole of Canada.
So longevity is clearly part of what makes you you. But one of the downsides of that is that when the older one gets, the more people you know who die.
Yeah.
Someone once asked Di Vernon, how do you deal with losing so many friends? And his answer was, you find younger friends. But I want to bring up a couple of people who you knew. Here's a name that someone mentioned this earlier, and I thought, what a good name to bring up. I'm interested in this. And it's a name that some people here will instantly know and some won't, but we'll explain who it is. William Lindsay Gresham.
Oh, my. Oh, yes.
Now,
well, I see some recognition in our
Yes.
audience. Yes.
To those who don't know, Gresham was a writer. He wrote, his most famous work was Nightmare Alley. He wrote what I think is the best biography of Houdini, called Houdini, the Man Who Walked Through Walls. Now, it's filled with inaccuracies, but it's the best read of all the Houdini biographies that I've ever read.
Yeah.
It's the most engaging to read,
Best
if you're willing to ignore how many facts he got wrong. But he also wrote other novels and other books and nonfiction works, and was very immersed in the magic community. He was based in New York and knew a lot of people, including you. So I ask you, tell us about what comes to mind when his name comes up.
Well, if you have a copy of the book, I'm sure they'll all rush to get a copy of it now, Houdini, the Man Who Walked Through Walls. I gave some assistance to Bill Gresham. I tried to get a lot of those errors out of there, but they were too good. They sounded too good, I guess, and he kept them in there. They weren't serious errors. They were just maybe dates or whatever. But I gave him a lot of assistance on the book, and it was in the very final stages. He had to rush it off to the printer. And he promised me as a result, he said, you'll be the first and the last name in the book. So if you look at the copy of that, it's dedicated to me and on the dedication page. And when you go to the very end, it says thanks for all of his help and guidance to James Randi. So I'm the last one and the first one in the book. So there. Ha-ha.
The Alpha and Omega.
Exactly. That's more. Yes.
What kind of a guy was he?
He was he was a very strange character. He lived in I think was it Croton on Hudson or I forgot. Anyway, yes, well, he was a great writer. He wrote many books that you should really look up. Look, William Lindsay Gresham. Don't forget that. Google will tell you everything about him, I assure you. And most of that is true. But no, he had a great interest in magic. He got to know all the magicians. He traveled a great deal as well. He went all the way to England to research a book that he never got written on a spirit medium that he took an interest in. And he went to the Society for Psychical Research, the UK, went to the SPR, and did a lot of research there. And unfortunately, I lost track of his wife after he died, and I've not been able to track her because I'm sure she has the notes that he made. Those would be wonderful to see, because he really was a good researcher. He tried very hard to get these facts together. The Houdini story, he fluffed up a bit. We admit that.
Yes, but again, great read.
Yeah, it was good fluffing.
One of the interesting things about Gresham, Ray Hyman, who was a longtime friend of yours and was very close with Jerry Andrus, because
Oh, yes.
Ray's based up in the Portland area now. And Ray, in addition to being an academic and a very fine magician, he has a particular interest in the topic of cold reading, something that I'm sure most people
And Ray
here
is a psychologist by
Yeah,
profession.
yeah. And Ray is not certain of this, but he thinks that the first time the word cold reading, with the meaning that we ascribe to it now,
Yes.
of telling people things about themselves on the fly without prior knowledge, that the first time that appeared in print may have been in Nightmare Alley.
Yes, it
The
might very
term
well
is
have been.
nowhere near as old,
Yeah.
at least in terms of being established in print. It's nowhere near as old as we tend to think of it. We assume it goes back to the 19th century, but at least in terms of, it may have been in the spoken vernacular, but I haven't found an earlier example of its use.
I don't know of the...
Nightmare Alley was around 1946 or earlier?
47, 48.
47, okay. And so,
And Tyrone Power played the
in the film.
lead in that film, and Gresham was really disappointed in the film because it didn't really. Well, there were lots of sexy bits in the novel, but none of that was used. That was Hollywood in those days, and but he was sort of disappointed that it didn't really round out the character of the.
The film has some very powerful stuff, and it's finally been released just a few years ago.
Oh,
It was tied up, the rights were tied up for a long time, and so all during most of the video era, you couldn't get it. But it is now out and on DVD.
I hope they haven't colorized it.
I would hope not.
I would certainly hope not.
Let's jump around a little bit. We touched momentarily on seances. And somehow that gives me a segue into a piece of videotape that I would like to introduce, or have you introduce.
Okay.
This is my single favorite clip of James Randi. And Thomas, have we got? Yeah, this is
Which
Thomas,
one?
who is part of
Which one
JRF.
is this?
This is the one where you went on to a little show called The Tonight Show, hosted by Johnny
A
Carson.
few times, 22 times over the years.
But on this particular occasion, you decided to do a demonstration of psychic surgery.
Oh yes, yes, we went outside to see the audience, the potential audience, standing outside in line, waiting to get into the studio. And I went along and I chose a reasonably corpulent gentleman and asked him if he'd volunteer, and he gladly gave permission. Now this is psychic surgery, so-called. Those words are in quotes. Imagine that, okay? Now, stage blood is terrible. It stains the skin, which blood won't do, and it's just not compatible with a really good demonstration. So the blood you're going to see here is real, but it came from Carson's secretary. She actually went to the resident nurse there at NBC. And she volunteered to have 20 cc's of her blood taken. Now, that's dedication. That's dedication, you got to admit. And she didn't mind at all. She was a good sport about it all. And so the blood I'm using here is really blood. And I make a joke, halfway through this thing, because the tension building in the audience was quite considerable. And I had to make a bit of a joke, and I think you'll know when the joke comes. I hope you'll laugh.
May I also mention, I'm not going to reveal the joke, you'll see it, but you told me, and I was very impressed by this, that the joke was an ad lib.
Yeah.
You had not pre-planned it, but rather you felt that there was so much tension, and you came up with this gag on the spot, and I think it's one of the great moments
Because
in
I was seeing people literally in the audience doing this kind of thing, and looking away, and said I didn't want them to do that, so it sort of broke the tension.
So without further ado, this is from '86 approximately?
Many years ago, yes.
Yeah, some mid-1980s. This is James Randi demonstrating something which at the time was kind of a brand new sensation. People were reading about it and there were books coming out about it. And this was probably the first time that almost anyone in the American viewing audience had a chance to see psychic surgery.
We want people who go down there and pay good money. You all set? Indeed. All right, we'll have our patient. It's all yours. Oh.
Now, this is the time to look away if you need to, because it's going to get a little gory from now on. The psychic surgeons of the Philippines are, how you feeling, Sandy, okay?
Everything's fine.
They're pretty heartless folks. They just don't much care for the feelings of people. They don't certainly care for their health at all. And, of course, they're not in any way trained to do this sort of thing. They just put on an act as if they are trained. Now, what you're about to see is a bare-handed operation which appears to take place by actually penetrating the body. Believe me, what you're seeing is strictly special effects. It's sleight of hand and nothing more. And this is the way it looks.
I can't watch this. Great sound effects, too.
Anything that gets down there, we don't get it on your trousers if we can help it. Let me see. This is terrible. It's getting worse and worse. Wait a second now. Oh, no, that doesn't come out. A bonus. That's a bit better. Just a second. Just 1 second now.
Maybe better for you.
You don't feel any better? And the strange thing is, after this operation is all over, now, mind you, folks, I want you to bear in mind, please, that people are showing this as if it were really serious, as if it actually did take place, and as if surgery were really performed. People do this, they go to the Philippines, they spend their money, and they frankly return home, in most cases, to die. It's a little bit funny to watch it, perhaps, and you say, gee, I know it's play acting. But it's not play acting when they go, by the tens of thousands every year. Sanford, I want to thank you for being a wonderful volunteer. I think you deserve a round of applause for that. Thanks very much.
James Randi.
Official appointment secretary is sheer genius.
Really?
Okay, we'll leave that editorial alone.
Can I wash my hands?
That still has a pretty powerful
Oh, yeah.
zing to it,
it
these
does, yeah.
many years later. How did you practice that?
Well, that was my dad, actually, on the table. Yeah. No, I had done it at many lectures before that, when it was an item that was in the news all the time.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, this was getting the psychic surgery thing, which was located mostly in the Philippines, a little bit in South America,
Yeah.
and it was huge. There were
yeah.
there were major articles about it in Time magazine and the equivalent, and television reports and so forth.
Well, I just worked out a couple of methods of doing it. That was a combination of two different methods of doing the same effect, and hope you didn't catch me. But yeah, it's not too difficult to do. I could teach anyone to do that, really.
Now, had you in researching this, had you had the opportunity to actually go and witness
No,
a psychic
I-
surgeon,
no, you
or
couldn't get into a thing like that. But in seeing some of the films, someplace it was very evident what they were doing. They were really bad at it, but they didn't have to be good at it because the people already believed that they were doing miracles. So it worked no matter what, and they collected a lot of money. They got fabulously wealthy on it.
And this was back in the days. Now with cable television and literally hundreds of channels to choose from, the television pie is split up into very small pieces, and even the broadcast shows get, compared to the old days, get very small ratings. This was when Carson owned the night.
Oh, yeah.
And so the number of people who would watch the Carson show and talk about it the next day was huge.
You literally could not walk down the street if you'd been on the Carson show the night before.
What was the kind of reaction that came in the days following this particular appearance on Carson?
Well, it was very. Oh, the mail I got. I've got boxes full of it. Really, you're a terrible person. This is a spiritual thing. You should not make fun of spiritual things. And these are holy men of God, and et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, a lot of people saying, "Good for you. I'm glad that you exposed this sort of thing." But I was on my way to Japan a couple of months after that, and I stopped in the Philippines because I'd gotten requests from the newspapers there, and I stopped in the Philippines, tried to get through immigration, and they stopped me. Now, what was his name? The dictator, Marcos. Yes, Marcos. Thank you. I get a lot of stuff out of this. Ferdinand Marcos was the dictator of the Philippines at the time, and he knew this was a good piece of business that was bringing in millions of dollars in tourist money to the Philippines, and he wasn't about to let that happen. So I was escorted by the police to the hotel that I was staying at, and I had two guards outside my door to make sure I didn't get out. And I was essentially under house arrest, or hotel arrest, I guess you could call it. At that time, I stayed there for 3 days, and I appealed to the American consulate. I couldn't get any answer out of them. I called the Canadian consulate, and they came around right away. I was a Canadian citizen at the time, so that made them react rather quickly. And I was escorted to the airport and put on a plane, and I continued on to Japan.
So we know, at least, it was before 1987.
Yes.
Because that's when you changed citizenship.
Exactly.
Is that, this is an odd question to ask, is that the only time you've had a situation where government agents held you in your hotel room or tried to push you out of the country?
That was the only time that happened. It's not a pleasant experience, I can tell you. You never know whether someone's going to come out come along in the middle of the night and do you darns. I mean, yeah, they could do all kinds of surreptitious things. We magicians know about surreptitious stuff, of course, you see, but they could do deadly surreptitious stuff. And Marcos was a beast. He was a total beast. The best thing ever happened to the Philippines is him dying. That's a good thing for the Philippines and for the world, I would say.
Not so good for the shoe industry.
No. The women's shoe industry took a nosedive after that, of course. Imelda Marcos had something like 1,400 pairs of shoes that she had accumulated. Well, a lot.
If you have to explain them, it's...
No. It loses impact, yes.
I have, speaking of the things like performing psychic surgery, I notice that sitting on the floor right down there,
yes.
There is a check.
Checkbook.
A checkbook, but the top check on there says it's made out for $1 million.
That's correct.
From the James Randi Foundation, the Educational Foundation, I should say. There's only one flaw.
It's not a flaw, it's a provision. Let's put it that way, yes. It says paid to the order and that's blank. You can enter your own name. And then it says at the bottom, prove any paranormal ability and we'll replace this fake check with a real one. So there. And we give these out as souvenirs, and it does advertising on the back. It tells about my family business and a few things like that. Yes.
And I will mention that through the good graces of DJ Grothy and JREV, we have enough of these that there's one for everyone here.
Oh boy.
That's one check apiece, not a full pad of them.
Yes. And,
but we have a whole bunch of them back there, so at the end of the evening's conversation, we'll manage to distribute them, and anybody who wants to apply, the information on how to do it is right here. Yeah, I've already...
How to apply, not how to win.
Right. I've already taken mine, just
okay.
in advance preparation.
He's already entered his name on the payees. Now, this brings up an interesting point, however. I made an offer some time ago. Now, there is $1 million in a special account. It's 1.2 something million at the moment. We have reached into that fund every now and then and taken some of the interest off the top to help run the foundation when we've needed extra funding. That is a genuine offer, and I put up on Swift, named in honor of Jonathan Swift, our webpage, I put up a notice quite some time ago saying that if there's any doubt whether the $1 million exists, all you have to do is get in touch. I give phone number, email address, the whole thing, everything that is needed. And people are still claiming, the so-called psychics out there, saying, oh no, I investigated, there's no $1 million, that's a fake. You know, he's a magician, he lies about these things. There is no $1 million. Well, there is $1 million that was given to us by an obviously very wealthy man who contributed to our cause. And it's sitting in the bank and it's waiting to be snapped up. Now, we have not received one request for the documentation that the prize actually exists. And yet psychics all over the world are still saying, I get notices on it every day saying, oh no, I checked it out, there is no money, that is a fake offer altogether. But no one has ever applied for the evidence. There's a message.
For months now, we've been actually putting the statement online for anyone's viewing.
That's correct, yes. This is DJ Grothy, our president, by the way. Very
And
proudly.
for those of you who couldn't hear what DJ just said, the information about the contest, or contest challenge, call it what you will, is online. The statement about the real existence of this funding is there. Speaking of this challenge, not too long ago there was an episode of, was it Nightline on ABC, where representing JREV there was Banachek,
Yes.
and
DJ.
typing in the background was Jamie Ian Swiss, and they went to New York and conducted several tests to applicants, none of which panned out for the applicants. But how did you feel that was handled in terms of how ABC presented it? Because I know sometimes you feel, with reason, that you are not given a fair
Representation.
representation.
Yeah. No, we were reasonably satisfied, weren't we, DJ? Yes, reasonably satisfied. ABC did its best and did very well, so we're very grateful to them for that. But we did a stunt too. That DJ was behind this. I thought this was a corny stunt, and I was wrong, DJ. I apologize profoundly. He announced that he was going to send some, let's say, actors out to see James von Prague when he was doing one of his sessions. He charges a huge amount of money. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a lot of money just to sit in an audience and have him tell you vapid stories and do cold reading with you. And he doesn't do it all that well, frankly. One of his favorite stunts in the cold reading stunt, you folks know what cold reading is, of course, okay. And but one of his stunts I'd love to see, and you can see him do it so frequently. He'll say something like, I'm getting an M name. I think it's Michael. Do you know a Michael? And the victim will say, "Oh yes, Michael was a member of my family. Yes, he was a cousin, I believe, wasn't he?" And she'll say, "No, he wasn't a cousin. He was my brother." And he'll say, "Yes, because he's just saying to me that he wasn't a cousin. He was a brother." Now this is quick. It's quick thinking, but it's a very standard thing with von Prague and all the cold readers. They give back to you what you just told them, and then when you grab the person after and say, "How impressed were you with that?" They say, "Well, he knew who Michael was. He identified him." "No, he didn't. You told him that." "Oh no." But that's exactly what they did. They reconstructed differently, and a good cold reader should be able to make people believe that that's the way it happened.
Now, I know some of the television shows. I've certainly not seen anywhere near all of your television appearances. I have a life to live, but and there are a lot of them. Is my point. There are a lot of them, but I do recall several times seeing you on the Larry King show.
Oh yes.
Where they would put you on usually with one or two psychics, such as James von Prague or Sylvia Brown or one of those. And I felt, at least when watching this, that Larry King was not being very even-handed on this. And I don't know Larry King. He seems like a nice enough guy, but
he's smart enough to know better. But Larry and I have always gotten along rather well. I realize he has to do a program. It has to be something that gets a lot of attention. His producers are very adamant that there has to be some woo-woo in the thing that will survive the program and not be completely drowned. But in later years, he got worse and worse on me, and I did many Larry. I don't know how many Larry King shows I did, but I did a great number of them. Oh, I got to tell you a Larry King story. He'll hate me for saying this, but he used to do a radio program right after he did taping when he was in the Washington area. And he asked me before the program, he said, "Will you come and do the radio show after?" I said, "Yeah, sure, why?" I was in town and I had the opportunity to do it, so we did the TV bit. I don't know who was on with me at the time. Then he said, "We'll go over and do the radio show." Now, in a small studio, but it had a big reach, that radio program. And I was talking, I was delivering some tirade of some kind or another, and I looked over at Larry, and Larry was sound asleep. He had dozed off, and he was literally like this. And you could see the body doing the deep breathing thing. And I looked over, and I had to carry on in the program. I had to continue the conversation, and I kept on doing the business on the table, and he wasn't moving at all. Then suddenly he looked up and looked around, and I said, "But Larry, what do you think?" And then I had to save him. I said, "I mean, regarding the fact that," and I gave the details of what I'd just been talking about, and he fell right in with it. He sort of smirked at me, but he fell right in with it. But he was literally snoring on mic.
that was very gracious of you to let him off.
Yeah,
the
I
hook.
thought so. Yes.
But when you would have an experience on, let's say, on the Larry King show, where it came out feeling very not even-handed, and where he enabled some of your adversaries, let's say, in ways that didn't necessarily make you look good, Did this lead to discussions prior to your next
No,
visit on the show?
no, not really, because the exposure was so valuable. Any kind of exposure on the Larry King show was very valuable, and I figured to myself, I should be able to hold my own. You know, I've been around for a while, and I should have the experience to get around these things. I did generally rather well, but again, Larry had a program to do, and he knew, and he was getting feedback in his earpiece as well. You know, make him look like a fool or something. I don't know what was being said, but he was getting cueing at the same time.
Yeah, the Peter Popoff approach.
Exactly.
Well, we're talking about a lot of different television things, and one of the TV clips that I know we have lined up on the computer, you specifically said you wanted to show, and it's been so long since I've
Yes.
seen it. To be honest, have forgotten the details, except I know it's from the 1970s, and it's on Barbara Walters' morning show. I
Yes.
believe the show was called Not for Women Only,
Not for women only, yes.
and it was a network show.
It
on
was
ABC,
first called
and
For Women Only, and then they changed it, Not for Women Only, very wisely, very wisely.
So this was a daytime show with a huge viewing audience.
Yes.
And this was on an episode where you were not the only magician involved. And as we can
And
see,
you'll see Doug Henning and Mark Wilson
there's
sitting
Mark
there.
Wilson in the middle and Doug Henning off to the right. And,
Now let me tell the
set this up,
surrounding on
please.
this thing. Now, Barbara had a dreadful little woman who hated my guts. She hated all magicians and such, and she made it very obvious. But you know, Wilson, and Henning, we're going to talk about general things and magic and such. But I was sort of under the gun, and I wanted to set up a thing whereby the Geller drawing thing, where he had it sealed up in an envelope and he'd be able to tell you what it was. Now, the way Geller does it, he has it done right in front of him in the dressing room with mirrors all around and everything. I guess we can figure out methods for doing that sort of thing, you see. And of course, that isn't mentioned when they get on camera that the drawing was made in the dressing room with Geller, who's shielding his eyes like this, you see. And in any case, I had to work out a method of doing it. Now, on the tables that the audience sat at, they had these yellow pads with a Barbara Walters show or something on them, and they had ruled line, and they had a pencil attached to each one of them. And this is well before the show. And I said to Barbara, I said, "Oh, Barbara, here, why don't you go over in the corner there and make a drawing?" Now, I had prepared it in such a way that I would know what the drawing was from what was it called? Carbon paper. You remember carbon paper? Yeah, I did it a little more subtly than that. I did it with soap, actually, but that's another story altogether.
an idea that you published in Ibidem
That's
magazine
true,
in the
Ibidem.
1950s.
From Howard Lyon.
A Canadian magic journal.
In Canada,
so-
yes. Oh, yes. Many, many moons ago. And so I gave the pad to Barbara, and she went over to the side of the room, and her producer came over and took the pad away from her. No, she didn't know how it was done, but she just said, "No, we'll do that in the dressing room, Barbara," and she threw it down, and she led Barbara into the dressing room. And Barbara came out of the dressing room sometime later with an envelope, and I told her, I said, "No, seal it in a second envelope as well, Barbara, to make sure that I can't see through the envelope." And the producer sort of did this kind of thing, saying, what is going on here? You'll see in a moment why. But so Barbara went back and then came back with the envelope in a book. And I knew I wasn't going to get to that book. And I looked at Wilson and at Henning, who were already seated on the set. The audience was just coming in at this point. And I looked at Wilson and I said, "You get a peek?" And he said, "No." And I looked at Henning and I said, "How about you?" "No, I have no idea." So I knew I was on my own, and I had to use a technique which, if you watch carefully here, this is a bad quality videotape. I apologize for that. But you may see the gimmick that I used. If so, just nod quietly and look smug, okay? And then I'll tell everybody afterwards what it was.
Israeli, and it's been tested by the Stanford Institute and by other scientists, and is said to have psychic powers. We had the former astronaut Edgar Mitchell on with us, who believes very much in Uri Geller. And Randi, you've been going around the country, somewhat as Houdini used to in the past, trying to debunk those who say that it's psychic power. You say it's magic. Right?
Well, Barbara, you see, in what you said just now is something rather revealing to me, because you say that he's been tested by the scientists at the Stanford Research Institute. First of all, Stanford Research Institute is not connected in any way with Stanford University, though it happens to be on the grounds. It takes its name from its locality. And the Stanford Research Institute, as an institute, did not test Uri Geller. Two scientists there whose specialty is lasers, nothing to do with psychology, nothing to do with conjuring, certainly, whose specialty is lasers, went through some private tests with Uri Geller under anything but test conditions. And since then, the psychology department down there, and I've read this in one of the psychological journals, has tested him, gave him 100 envelopes that he was supposed to guess the contents of, and he failed each and every one of the 100.
Let me show some things he did with me. And I'm a pretty honest person, okay? I mean, we all know it.
I understand that,
no
yes.
kidding. This is my house key. Uri Geller took it. Let's take this other one. It's a matching key. He went like this with it, with his finger. That's all. No pressure. And the key bent. You can see that. And I've carried it around because I found that I'm a believer now. Here also, people in the audience said that their keys bent. Well, I can't prove that, but I can prove that mine did. Here is my identical key. Touch it and make it bend.
Now, do we have another piece of metal? I need another piece of metal.
He didn't use metal, he just used his finger.
No, that's very true. That's very true. But I want to show you a comparison.
Okay, give me another key.
Now, this is the bent one. Now, which camera is taking this? Can we get a close-up here now? All right, now,
that's the original
okay,
bent
you can
one.
see the bent one here. There is a definite bend in here. Is that right?
Okay.
Now, watch. Watch it very carefully. I am going to see if I can... This is a different one from this one. This one's a duplicate, am I correct?
Right.
This one has a stamp on it saying 207 West something. This doesn't have a stamp on it. You see the little stamp on it there?
Yeah.
Would you hold the end of it very lightly in between your fingers, Barbara? And I'm just going to stroke it. Now, I'm not putting enough pressure on it to bend it.
No.
Okay. I'm just going to stroke it with my fingers very lightly like this. Now, look at the bend that's in the other key.
No, I won't take my eyes off this key.
Very good. I'm glad to hear you say that. Would you show it to the camera, please? Now, is it bent as much as this key or not? Are you going to keep this key too, Barbara? On your keychain?
Next, Barbara spoke about the drawing replication trick, one of the only 5 tricks that Geller has ever been known to do. Her producer had challenged me to do it, hoping for a failure, of course. Barbara had made a drawing to test me and carefully kept it in her hot little hand right until she showed it on the set. Both Mark and Doug thought I'd go down in flames, but I had a couple of twists for them and for the audience.
So the Uri Geller
Oh, we're going to show a tape. Okay, very
can
good.
we show that? This is where he read my mind and reproduced a picture that only I had.
Okay, just a second, look at me. Visualize everything that you drew once more. I'm gonna show what I got, and if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, but it really came very strong in. I'll tell you what first I thought it was and what it comes to appear now. First I thought there were 2 churches with peaks on, or 2 houses. Then it turned to a letter M, and then it could be 2 mountains with a round thing on, or 2 people.
Can I show?
Yeah, I'd like to. Am I wrong?
You're right.
I'm right. Good. That's what I got.
The letter M, if you got a letter M,
Yeah,
may not be because of that, but because my drawing is a drawing similar to one that my child does. It's a mother and child.
Oh, that's...
This is it. We have not had this envelope out of our sight. Randy has in no way been close to it. The closest you've been to it, to my knowledge, is
this
right
close
now. Reproduce
Would you
it.
put it back in the book? I want to make sure that it is under good control.
I believe I can't.
All right, Barbara, I'm going to ask you to concentrate on what's drawn inside
What's the
there.
point of concentrating? I know now.
Watch this, Wilson. I may surprise you.
Surprise me.
May surprise everybody. You concentrating on what you're doing
I
there?
just said to Mark, watch this, Wilson.
I don't want you to see the end of the pen moving. You may look and say, that doesn't look quite right.
Yes, because song begins, and I hear a violin.
It's tragic. I'm a very bad artist. You'll have to pardon me, Barbara, but all right, I've made what I believe to be an impression of it. Now, It can't be altered in any way. Would you be kind enough to open up the envelope and let's see how right I was? Oh, like Uri says, thanks God, I hope I'm right on this. That's the way he says it to me. Well, open it up and show it to the camera, if you'd be so kind.
Where's the cameras? Here's a camera.
Is that a house?
It's a little, well, I don't draw so well. It's a little house and a sun, and here's a little person. A house, that's the sun, and that's a little person.
Well, you'll pardon me for being a very bad artist, Barbara, but I didn't get the sun at all. I got the little person, but I got the little person inside the house and the smoke coming out to the top here. That's all we could get of it. This.
Can't see it.
Thanks God you got it.
Thanks God I got this. Yes. Yes, we got the house with the...
How do you do it? If you're going to debunk this man, whom everybody believes, you have to tell us how you do it.
I'm going to add the sun here to make
Come
my
on,
results a
tell
little
me
bit
how you
better.
do it.
How about that, folks?
Yes, you can't quite see.
The drawing that I made, it was made with a simple ballpoint pen, not a broad one.
All right. Boy, I haven't seen that in so many years. I'd forgotten the bit about adding the sun after the fact.
Did anyone see the
very
gimmick? I'm talking about the envelope trick now. First of all, there's a bit cut out of there because she had to remove the outside envelope, and then I asked her to hold it up to the light to make sure that she couldn't see through the envelope. And she said, well, maybe I can a little bit. And I said, okay then, well, open up the, and I'd already made the drawing, apparently. I used a new invention. I've heard of thumb writers, of course. This is a belly writer. If you look at it carefully, if you see that again, I had simply taken a pen off the table and I had stuck it with the active end out here in my belt like this. And I simply kept my hand in front of it. And when the time came, I took the paper. When I said, watch this, Wilson, I had already caught a glimpse of through the thin envelope of what it was, and I started to draw, and I was doing this and moving back and forth. And as I would move towards her, I was writing the thing with my belly. And it certainly worked well enough.
Have you had any contact with Miss Walters since then?
Oh, many times, yes.
And did she come around to feeling you were not a threat to her belief system? Or?
Oh, yeah. No, Barbara's... she's a very bright lady, and she's very active and very, very alert and such. But she always asked me, how did you do that thing with the drawing? I mean, she does ask me that, and it's our running gag, more or less. I've never cracked. Now, don't tell Barbara Walters, okay? Because I want this gag to go on forever and ever and ever.
Now, you may have noticed that as we were turning off the video, it was clear that this was a YouTube video.
Yeah.
In fact, JREF has a YouTube channel with a lot of footage, as well as some audio podcasts and just a lot of things. And they have just recently been informed that the JREF channel is in the top 10 nonprofit channels on all of YouTube, which is pretty impressive.
Oh yes.
And any of you who missed the first conversation we had here,
you can see it
back in September of 2010, a little over a year ago, it is up on the on the JRF channel. So you can find all the stories that we've jumped over this time.
Yes, indeed.
So,
how are we doing for time, by the way?
We're good.
Oh,
how are you guys doing for time? Yeah? All right. I want to move into something a little bit special to make good on a promise we made a year and a couple of months ago. The last time we did a talk, we had you offer to perform something, not on video, but right here. And then we wound up out of time. And so we agreed that when you came back, you would perform something. So I believe you have something that you intend to perform. I don't know what it is, and I don't know
I saw your eyes drop down towards.
Well, I
this,
saw this. I figure that might have something to do with it.
It does indeed.
All right.
It does indeed.
Shall I
yes,
leave and get out of the way, or
no,
stand here and add color?
no.
I mean, it's up to you.
I'm not afraid of you, Max. Not very afraid of you. But,
Better
this is a mentalism trick. Mentalism bores you, and you can leave the room. But a mentalism trick that I developed some time ago, and I've often done this at my various lectures around the world, and it works in all languages. I'll be showing you all of this stuff in a second here. Wait till I dip down very deep into the bag here. And this is what we reveal to your anxious gaze. All right. Now, these are, they're printed by the Bicycle Company. I don't know whether you knew this or not, but giant ESP cards. A circle, plus mark, three wavy lines, the square, and the five-pointed star. Now, actually, there are numbers to these things. I always do them by numbers. That has one line. This has two lines. This has the three wavy lines, four sides of a square, and a five-pointed star. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you see. And I have here a whole, you get quite a few envelopes here, into which these will fit. But, even more importantly, these are folded pieces of black paper, quite opaque, I assure you. And I'm going to hand these out to members of the audience here. Now, these are not Confederates of mine. Are you there, Sam? Yeah. I'm going to hand these envelopes out to, you can take these if you would be so kind. Would you shuffle them up? Make sure that they're all mixed. And these, we're only going to use 5 of these, and there's quite a number here. Sir, would you shuffle these up? All righty. We'll see how well they shuffle envelopes and such. And these 5 cards here, I'm going to ask you to, this gentleman right here can do it for me. You've seen the cards very plainly, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to ask you to turn them face down and then shuffle them up very thoroughly while I look away, and make sure that you don't know which card is which, okay? Okay, now, let us, you can be my go-between. Would you go down to the end of the row here and ask the 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, the 5 people on the end of the row there to select any one of those envelopes, okay? Each one of them, okay? So if the envelopes are marked in any way, this is impossible to tell anything, but I'll take the rest of the envelopes here, if you would be so kind. Thank you very much. I was going to ask for a round of applause for you, but that would take too much time. Yes. Okay. Now, where is the black? Yes. Would you go down to the end there and distribute, ask them to choose one of the black folding pieces, please. So if these were marked or specially gimmicked with little beads, beads or anything in the corner, this randomizes the whole thing. Okay. So 5 of them have been handed out, and I'll take the rest of them. Thank you so much. Okay. Now, you have these cards mixed up. Yes. Now, I shouldn't be looking towards you at all, but we're going to remedy that as well. I want you to go down there, and each of you folks, when you take one of these cards, keep it face down. I don't want you to know what it is, okay? So go down to the row, keeping the faces out of sight, and distribute those cards, or I ask them to choose one. Keep them down so they can't see what they're getting. Okay, now, you 5 people, listen carefully to the instructions. I want you to take your card without looking at it, place it inside the black piece of paper. Okay, and take it and put it inside the envelope. Just slide it inside the envelope. Very good. Okay, now, you can use the clasp on it, or you can lick the gum on it, or whatever you want, or you can do both, depending on how secure you want to feel. Okay? Now, when those have all been done, now, would you pass them up to this 5th gentleman right here, pass them down the row, and I want him to mix them up thoroughly, turn them over, and completely randomize them. Now, this is as fair a shuffle as you're ever going to get. Very good. Oh, look at that. He did a double lift. That's wonderful. Okay, so they're mixed up in such a way, sir, that you don't know which one is the original envelope that you had, for example. All right, are they sealed? I see it's a flap. It's flapping on one of them. Oh, no, it's sealed. Oh, okay, all right. Now, bring them to me if you'd be so kind. Now, we really, have we got better light here? Because, no, I guess we can't do much with it. But in any case, here are 5 envelopes. Now, there are several ways that or solutions that have been offered to me for this. And I want you to, it's very difficult for you folks in the back. I'm sorry you can't see, and we don't have a camera on this, but nonetheless, I'll hold them up one at a time, and you'll see if you get the idea. Now, each one of these envelopes has a card of which I do not know the identity. I think you'll agree with me on that, okay? Fair enough? Now, I'm going to pick, watch, the people in the front row have to be the witness for this, but I'm going to pick up each envelope, or one envelope here to start with, by the extreme corner, and I'll hold it up like this so you can see it, okay? Now, this is hard to, oh, I'm sorry, put my finger on the other side. Holding it up between 2 fingers like this, you'd say to yourself, wait a minute, is there a bead in the corner of the envelope? Well, if there were, the envelopes are already mixed up anyway, right? So that's not going to make any difference. I think you'll agree with that? Right. Okay. Now, all right, so much for that one. For this one, I can pick it up by an opposite corner, for example. So there shouldn't be any possibility of me faking this kind of thing. Can you see through it?
I'm verifying that the black size of the inside paper is there, but nothing else is showing through.
All right, I'm going to put that one out at the front like that because I get a special feeling about that one. Yeah, sure. If you believe that, then I think I've got. Oh, this didn't get quite sealed here, so maybe I better not. All right, let me. First of all, I'm sorry. I'm having a difficult time. I have a really very bad hip, folks, and I don't want to apologize for it too much, but it is a very difficult thing for me to manage up here. All right, I will, wait a second. Oh, goodness, I'm having a hard time here. All right, I'm going to put this one in that position, and now what I'm going to do is, again, you can't see this. This is very unfortunate, but I'm going to kneel down here. Oh, the knees. Oh, yeah. I'm going to remove each card. Now, I believe these are in the order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll announce that in advance. I'm going to remove each envelope.
For those of you sitting in the back, he has made a row on the floor, going from your left to right. He is now opening the envelope that, after rearranging everything, he is opening the envelope that was at the far left end.
All right, and I'm going to place it right back where it was, okay? There it is, and that's a used envelope. This one the same way. Oh, this one wasn't licked at all. You really should have had the nerve to lick it, you know. Because I don't put much poison on them at all. Yes, and we don't need that anymore. And we'll put that right there. And let's see whether this one...
He's removing the cards, but with that black heavy paper still around them.
Still on it, yes.
So at the moment, we can't tell...
Look at the ceiling mirrors.
Oh, heavens.
You what? Sorry?
Someone has just pointed out that there are some mirrors on the ceiling directly above you. I'm not sure how that would help with the conditions we've got here.
It would only work if you were laying flat on the floor.
You can see it. Oh, this is the audience using mirrors to cheat. I understand.
Audience can see what you're doing.
Ah.
Yes,
Good
but they'd
point.
have to be laying flat on the floor.
No. They're actually able to see it from looking over you, Randy, because there's mirrors right above. So some of the folks are actually getting a view.
All right. Yes, so I understand. Yeah. Oh, you know that story too, do you? Okay. Now, oh, geez.
You want a hand?
Keep your seats. No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Oh,
Jesus.
it's a dirty laugh. Really, but I appreciate it. Okay, I hope that I'm correct on this, otherwise I have to kill myself. But I'll do it by starvation. It's much easier that way, yes. So let me just shake these out of the wrappers that I have here. Oh, well,
In the first position.
number one is in number one position. Number two is in number two
cross.
position. Number three is in
Wavy
number three
lines.
position. Number four is in
square.
number position. And number five.
And the star.
Now, folks, I usually do this on a table in front of a bunch of college students. I couldn't possibly do all this wounded hero thing on the knees and everything. But this principle, I think, is a rather subtle principle. Max and I have discussed this because I got into details on it, and I wanted him to share this particular illusion with me, this trick. Let's put it that way. Well, that's a dirty word, isn't it? Yes. Yep.
You're actually exposing me to these people that I actually did know what trick you were going to do.
Well, in any case, I have shared this with Max because, frankly, at 83, folks, you start to become aware of your mortality. I can tell you that well in advance. Because of that, I really wanted to share this. I'm sharing it with Banachek and with Max because I want to leave this behind. I want it to go someplace because we have found in magic, I think you'll agree with me on this, Max, I think rather vehemently, that the way to improve our trade of magic, of conjuring, a term I much prefer, is to share it with responsible other performers and put it out into the world. Sometimes you see it come back vastly improved. And it's because they get a chance to work on it and they have a different view of how they should present it or what the gimmick could be done with, what we could do to improve it. I think that putting it out into the world like that and letting it be distributed and not publicized with the public, I'm not talking about that, but you folks are not the public. And I want you to know that doing a simple thing like this, I did share it with a couple of magicians in the past, both deceased, so don't deceased, please.
Okay.
And try to keep going.
I promise to do my best.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know he's a man of his word, and he will. But those magicians added something to this in presentation, and again, they didn't think that I would have to do it on a floor, out of sight, with no cameras on it and such, but I think you will trust the witnesses that we have here, and I want to thank you 5 people for assisting me in this, and you, sir, and yes, thank you very much.
Well, first of all, I will say that I consider myself to be reasonably well-read when it comes to the subject of mentalism, and I can tell you that what Randy has here, although it is, it has a relationship to ideas that have been around since
Yes.
actually the 1700s.
And Max showed me this last night. He showed me the history of the general principle that is being used here.
But the particular details that Randy has brought to this are new and original with him, and well, you've seen what the result is.
Oh, thank you very much.
You touched on something as you were talking about the fact that you had generously decided to share this particular information with myself and with Banachek about leaving something behind and a legacy.
Oh, yes.
I think it's woefully premature for us to be talking about the James Randi legacy because given your remarkable vigor, I think 83 is still pretty early in the game for you.
Yeah, I hope so.
Having said that, it's arguably not too early to be talking about certain aspects of the Randi legacy. And so with that in mind, could I get DJ maybe and Thomas to come over and bring over this this thing we have hiding off to the side?
We have a thing, ladies
We
and
have a
gentlemen.
thing. You don't know about this, but we're about
How do
to...
you know I don't know about it? Yes.
That's my job.
If you had sealed it up in an envelope, I would know.
As we all know, the Magic Castle has very recently undergone a massive facelift by necessity, but as a result, there have been many improvements and changes in the decor. One thing that has been sorely lacking from the Magic Castle for these many years is what is hiding behind that black cloth. And Thomas, if you would do the honors. That is a splendid poster of Randi, the amazing Randi, the man no jail can hold, and it has been beautifully mounted and framed by the JRF folks, and we have spoken to Milt, and there will be a particularly main place for this to be up and on view. We're going to have it at the very opening of the walkway when you walk from the restaurant to the palace. And so you'll walk past Randi every night you come to the Magic Castle, and that way, even though we're delighted when you are here, even when you're not here, you'll be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. But I must say something, Max. This is an original. This is the original printing of the original Man No Jail Can Hold poster. There is a slightly larger one. It's about 25% or so larger, which is a reprint. But this has a secret in it. And I ask you all to investigate it by coming over and looking at it very carefully. Because after I got the artwork, and this is done by a man who signs himself as Jason, Jayson, who is now a very famous comic book artist, and his work fetches huge prices, but he was only starting at this time, many, many years ago, when he made this for me free and gratis, and I've always been grateful to him for that. The point is that this one has a message which I added to the artwork afterwards. Harry Houdini's name is represented in there.
And if you can find it, that's almost enough to win you the $1 million. It is a very
25 cents. 25 cents on it.
Very, very devious
it is
way. But Houdini's name is on that poster, and that'll give you just one extra reason to come study it,
and it
when it's on display.
Only say Houdini, it says Harry Houdini. Okay? All right. So I challenge you to find it.
Randi, we thank you so much for this poster. We also thank you for taking the time to spend this evening with us. And the final thing I'll say is I'm going to make you commit right now in front of all these people that we'll do a third one.
Yeah, we will.
James Randi.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, thank you all. Very good of you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Wow. Young man who approached me with his manager, and the manager spoke English very well, thank goodness. And he explained to me that this young man wanted to go to New York and wanted to get on the Sullivan Show. That was the big thing in those days, of course. And they wanted my advice on how to go about this. And deep from within my wise brain, I said, yes, I suggest that you'd want to go over there and announce your arrival in great style with a press agent and everything, hire a press agent, and dress in Japanese costume. Because America is very curious about Asian folks, and particularly the Japanese. They want to get to know them. And I think that would be a great success. And he translated to the artist, who then, subarashi desu ne. This gentleman speaks Japanese, so we can have little chats on the side. Yeah, right. Baranoki o mite kudasai. No, I'll tell you what that
Soshimasu.
later. Yes. Watch your language. Japanese, what's yours? He was horrified that he should wear Japanese costume. And I was informed that he wanted to look like Channing Pollock because they had seen the movie, the famous movie, the nightclub movie with Channing Pollock.
European Nights was the
Yes,
name of the
indeed.
movie.
Thank you very much. My dad takes care of me with things like that. And yes, and they wanted to do dove magic. And I said, no, you'll never. There are hundreds of kids all over the place, and adults, of course, doing dove magic acts. And they don't want that. They would like something flavored Asian. And, oh, no, we can't do that. He came over with his agent, without the press agent stuff in advance and such, and he sort of vanished and went back to Japan. And I'm sure that they thought to themselves, I wish we'd listened to the old duck there with the beard, because that could have been a sensation. That would have been wonderful. Because I had a connection with the Sullivan Show, even though I never played the show. But I had Mark Letty, the agent in New York,
Who booked all the Sullivan shows.
Yeah. And it was a great gig for him, wasn't it? Oh, yes. Every act that went on the Sullivan Show went through Mark Letty. And I could have talked to Mark and I could have gotten him on the show in Japanese costume, but he wouldn't have any part of it. They all wanted to be
And good evening to all. Welcome to what I'm about to introduce a gentleman who doesn't believe in predictions, but I can predict with certainty that you're going to enjoy the next hour or so. I know this not only from my own experiences of having talked with this gentleman many times, but also from the fact that just over a year ago, I had the great pleasure of interviewing him right here in this room, and I see many faces of people who were here back then, and it was so much fun, and there were so many stories and ideas left untold that right there we agreed that we would do this again. So this is actually part 2. I should also mention that this evening is being done in conjunction with JREF, the James Randi Educational Foundation, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that is. But I will also tell you that through the hard work of John Armstrong and DJ Grothy. DJ is the president of JREF, and John, of course, is on the board of trustees and runs a lot of stuff. And between the two of them, it is being worked on that this will be a series, and that we will have more of these long-term interviews, long-form interviews, involving people who intersect these two related worlds of the skeptical world, the paranormal world, the magician's world, and sort of everything in between. So no better way to get that started than for me to reintroduce, for part 2 of our conversation, the gentleman of the evening. Please welcome the amazing James Randi.
Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you so much. Channing Pollock.
And since Mark Letty was managing Channing Pollock, I would say the odds of getting a dove act on the Sullivan Show were particularly low.
Yes, but very, very low, yes.
So that was an interesting route, but we never got to the answer to my question.
What was the question?
The question was, do you feel there's a difference between the magicians who were prominent when you were coming up as a teenager and the magicians who are prominent now?
Well, of course, the advent of television made a great deal of difference, and a great deal of difference, a phenomenal difference. I remember an episode with Harry Blackstone, Sr. Harry Blackstone, Sr. I saw this in Canada. Oh, it's going to be a nice day after all. I saw a disaster with poor Harry. He was doing his business where he had I'm talking about Senior now, up in Canada, on a CBC show there, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and he did a business where he wasn't aware of the fact that he was mic'd. He was used to bellowing out at the audience like this. He never used a microphone on stage. And he had a great voice that carried to the far ends of the theater, I assure you. And he got the fellow up on stage. It was an audience participation thing where he had to cue the guy. And all of the cues came through very clearly. When I turned around, give me a push in the back. Yeah. And the guy said, yeah, of course. And well, we heard every cue, and I sat there at home watching this in black and white TV, saying, oh, no, it can't happen that way. Harry got over it, okay? But he wasn't aware of the fact that, that wasn't his métier.
Right. And this is why Harry Jr.
Yes.
wore what's called a belly switch, so that even when his hands were occupied, he could, by pushing out with his stomach, he could turn his microphone on and off for such cueing, and he would do it. He did it with such precision that you would never catch it. I mean, it would take you many
and later
hours
in his
of
life,
studying to see it to catch
as his
it.
belly developed.
I think they like you.
Well, no, they just applaud, you see. They do that automatic, it's a reaction, it's built into the DNA. It's a long story, I don't want to get into it.
All right. Let's move from that long story to a short story, because I have been informed that you have a topical tale you'd like to tell.
Yes, I'm sure. First of all, I've got to say that I am very honored to have been asked back here. The first one was pretty good. I don't know what I'm going to say this time, but I hope it's just as good. Or I welcome you folks back to the castle again. Many of you have probably not been here since the fire. And I'm amazed at the improvement of the close-up room, for one thing. Have you seen that? And in the dining room. I really like the changes that are made in the dining room. I'm so happy to be here at the castle, which is still with us, ladies and gentlemen, as I am. So there. But I am reminded, I'm reminded of the story of the two gentlemen at Miami Beach who are in adjacent deck chairs. Now, you see, I saw the improvements, the beautiful rug upstairs and stuff like that. It turns out that the castle, luckily, was heavily covered in insurance, and that did the job. And I'm very happy to assure you that if you should light another fire, it'll be taken care of, just in case. But the two gentlemen at the beach in Miami, side by side in deck chairs, one looks over and to the other friend, he says, how do you do, sir? My name is Feynman. I came here under strange circumstances. The fellow says, what circumstances? He says, well, he said, I was in the textile business and we had a fire. It was a terrible fire. And then when the insurance agent came to me, I realized I was really well covered in insurance. I made so much that at this early age, I've retired. And that's what brings me to Miami Beach. How come you're here? He says, well, that's a very similar story. Very similar story. I was in the hardware business and we had a flood, a terrible flood. Oh, you have no idea. It was just, and that brought me here. The other fellow looks at him puzzled. He said, a flood? He says, yeah, a flood. How do you set a flood? Think about it. Think about it. No, I'm very, very happy to announce to you that the castle has recovered beautifully, as you can see, and the shows are back in full swing. There's still a few adjustments and things to be done, but they're being done, and our castle is back in business. Yay! You bet.
Stay out here with us.
I'll try. I'm leaving tomorrow morning, but I'll be here for.
So have you seen any good magic here?
Have I seen any good magic here? Such a question. I tell you, the other night, well, I've been here 3 or 4 nights now in a row, and I must say that the show I saw a couple of nights ago, I went around, I took in every possible show, one after the other, bang, 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 like that. And that was simply the best night I had ever spent at the Magic Castle. And I've spent a lot of nights here, full evenings, and that one was, all of the shows were simply superb. I was stunned by it, And if you haven't seen the shows yet, folks, you've got a great treat ahead of you.
Well, the last time we spoke at one of these, we talked a bit about some of the magicians you admired in your youth. And that would include Harry Blackstone Sr. was one of the people we talked about, and several others. Do you feel that there is a significant difference between the magic that was going on when you were coming up as a teenager and what's going on in magic now? And I'll ask you this both plus and minus.
Well, I must say that the one thing I've observed in my long career in magic is the rise of the Asian element. I went, right after the war, I went over to Japan. I was actually entertaining troops there, Canadian and American troops, as a nightclub act sort of thing. And I got to see Japan right after the war. I was approached by so many young folks backstage who wanted to get into magic. And they had all seen Channing Pollock. This is an interesting angle. They had seen Channing Pollock, and had one gentleman, a very serious